Chuck Liddell ain't beat nobody in the top 15, top 20 in the UFC right now, right? You know, besides the select few people you can name, because I'll give you your GSP and your Anderson. That's the only two you probably can name to me that actually could compete if they were actually in their prime in this time. Everyone else would get smoked.
Welcome to Fighting Words, folks, a podcast all about UFC news, all about UFC debates, talking all things MMA. And we're just two dads that like talking about it. I am your host, Ian Mishak. I'm joined by my other host, Tyrelle Payton. What's going on, my man? How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to be on camera. This is nice.
Yeah, no, I know. It's the official debut of Fighting Words on our YouTube channel and Spotify, I guess the Spotify video functionality as well. So whether you're joining us from YouTube, Spotify, maybe you're listening to in your car and you can't watch us, well, please drive safely. But regardless, super stoked to have this kicked off and make our own path in the MMA community. And hope you're ready to jump into the octagon today, at least the podcast octagon. Okay, I'm sorry. What a horrible way to start. This is not me. Yes. But so today, the debate, I guess, to kick off our YouTube channel is to talk, were UFC stars bigger before kind of the shift, the Reebok era, as I like to call it, the shift into the modern era of the UFC, or are they bigger now? And what the first part of this is going to look like is I'm going to argue my side. I'm going to say, hey, I think that the UFC was bigger in the past as opposed to now. That was going to be my opening kind of argument discussion. Then Tyrelle is going to follow up and he's going to say, hey, this is what I think. And then we'll go back and forth a little bit. And then ultimately, we're not going to decide the winner. We want you guys, the listeners, the viewers, to let us know in the comments who won, who brought the value to arguments, who was saying unnecessary garbage, which I know Tyrelle will be, just because he's arguing a very poor side of the argument. So anyways, let's just jump into it. So the argument today for me is I do think that the old guard of the UFC was a much, much more star-driven organization than it is now. Here's why. We consistently see the UFC churn out these events weekend after weekend after weekend. And yet we don't know these fighters who are fighting on the main event. We don't know these fighters who are here standing up in front of us. We have to be dependent on an Instagram reel, a TikTok going viral, whatever the case may be, some sort of social media to tell us this is the fighter we should be watching. When back in the UFC in the old days, all they had was good old promotion and a great story behind it. I mean, you talk about the Chael and Anderson feud. You mentioned the Tito and Chuck fight. Pretty much everything in the light heavyweight division was a story in and of itself. It was the hottest division in the UFC. And now you look at it, it's like, well, you can't really tell one light heavyweight from another, and because they're all super talented. Ultimately, like, there was no story behind it. You don't feel passionate about it until they have a belt wrapped around them. Like, why should I care about this person? But the UFC invested in their old guard. They were the pioneers of the sport. They were the ones that said, hey, we are the UFC and we're going to bring this to the mainstream. You had awesome, exciting fights, consistently. Yes. Were they the most technical? No. And even looking back at them now, I'm like, not good to just see Chuck spamming overhand lefts and rights just to get a knockout. But it was exciting, and I had a blast watching it. My earliest fights were watching Anderson Silva just absolutely dismantle people. And I think his stardom, while yes, Conor was bigger, his stardom kind of surpassed all and was like the first true mainstream star for the UFC. I think obviously the rivalry with Chael Sonnen and the outcome of all of their fight is an instant classic, is one of those that you can think of even in the classic annals of history of the UFC. And in my opinion, nowadays we have these stars who, yes, some of them are very fun to watch, some of them are noteworthy, some of them are good, but I don't think they sit the same way. I don't think the golden era of the UFC has continued. I mean, like I mentioned, it's a dilution of brand. Sure, it's a dilution of, like they have a responsibility to service a bunch of different things. But at the end of the day, I mean, you showed up and you paid money and you wanted to watch these guys fight. That's all you knew. That's all you cared about. You didn't care about, who was sweeping the leg or who was, making sure that they were in a tight grappling position to win advantage. You were there to see somebody get knocked out, and you were there to see somebody win. And that was the exciting part of the UFC. And yes, do we see those highlights and those knockouts on the UFC Instagram and, on their YouTube channel and like highlighting those free fights? Yeah, sure. But all we knew at the time back in the UFC when it was the old days is, hey, we were hoping that something good was going to show up. And guess what? Those stars, they did show up in a big, big way. So I think that while the UFC has done a good job at establishing itself as a brand, they've taken away from the fighters who once could establish themselves as ultimate stars, and now they're just kind of sitting there amongst the flock. So it's my opening argument for why the old UFC is better than the new UFC. I'd love to hear your take on it, Mr. Tyrelle Payton.
Well, first, thank you for the mini nap I just took thinking about those old fighters. Thank you for that. I've been struggling with sleep the last few weeks, so you definitely helped me correct that. I'm just going to think about you saying that again when I'm trying to go to sleep, and I'll fall asleep.
Oh my gosh!
I don't believe you believe any of the stuff that just came out of your mouth. There's no way you believe any of that stuff about those guys, man. Come on, man, stop. Like, if you want to say Anderson Silva, let's do it, right? That's my guy. I'm here for the Spider. He is transcendent, though. But when you start naming people like Chuck Liddell,
don't disrespect the old guys.
Like, hey, listen, shout out to the Iceman. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was one of my favorites too. He's one of the people that got me into it. Actually, the first person that got me into it. But the problem with it is, like, people have to be pioneers and stuff to get stuff going. And I think that those guys were pioneers, right? They were the beginning force that led to what the UFC is now. But it is very clear that today, and when I say today, I mean, mid 2000s to now, all the there's bigger superstars. They're just across the board. People like a Jorge Masvidal became a superstar. Nate Diaz became a superstar. Like, people who don't even watch the UFC know who they are. Like, it just becoming a superstar, I don't want to say it's easier, but it kind of is, right? It's like social media helps cheat. And you said, you mentioned that back then people, they could promote a fight and people will lock into it. Well, they had less cards at that time too, right? So they had to put more promotion into that card with those big fighters because that was the only way they were going to survive, because they didn't have a plethora of superstars like we have now. Are there cons that come with having such a big brand and so many fighters? For sure. So now you see we have some cards, fight night cards that happen like this past weekend where we're like, probably won't watch the whole card. Maybe I'll check out the main event and watch Tai Tuivasa get choked out. Unfortunate, right? But like, so we'll watch those, right? Or something like that. But when you watch those main cards, those bangers that we get hype about, that we get sweaty about, you ain't getting that feeling from watching Chuck Liddell fight some dude that he could have fought at a bar for $15 that same night. Like, it's not entertaining. Like, they're not the same level of fighters. The talent is through the roof now. And you mentioned a lightweight division. You can't tell me that lightweight division is more entertaining than this lightweight division. Like, what we have now is insane. We talk about it all the time. Like, it's insane. It's the most deep division with so many people. And think about it. Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Conor McGregor before, but we know he can't make that weight no more. Right? Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev. Like, come on, man. Benil Dariush, BSD, who just got knocked out. Who else? Armin Sarukian. Like, that's like the top 8. Come on, man. Like, and they're not all superstars. But I'm saying, like, they're so entertaining in that division. But then you got to think about someone like a Francis Ngannou. Come on, man. Who's more entertaining at the heavyweight division than Francis Ngannou? Who you got? Who you gonna get me from that era who could compete with that? You gonna say Bigfoot Silva?
I mean, he did swing and bang. I mean, he was the definition of swing and bang. I mean, don't disrespect him too much. I mean, he did a lot of stuff. I mean,
he has CTE.
Always the best.
He has CTE.
No, and then some. But no, let's pump the brakes here, because
it's crazy.
The casual fan doesn't pay attention to the Armin Sarukian or the Benoit Saint Denis. No. They pay attention to whoever had the highlight of the highlights, who was winning the championship belt, and who they cared about and bought into. I've shared this before with you. My brother-in-law has no idea that Brock Lesnar is not in the UFC. He still thinks he's in the UFC. Now, granted, Brock is on all the juice, so for all I know, he probably could still fight in the UFC. However, I have to say this, that if we're talking about that, like Brock Lesnar being the guy like that he remembers, like who's to say that, like people who grew up that are our age that, grew up with the UFC being around, that they still believe that some of those guys are around, or like that the casual fan, they don't care about anyone past who has the belt, and they want to care about that. And if it means that there are more UFC events, that there's more UFC fights, okay, great. Like that's cool that they're able to do that and get those guys paid. However, it's not going to make the casual fan care about it anymore. In fact, it's probably wasting more money than they realize. And so, like, why not, be invested in your stars more? Oh, it's because you care more about the UFC brand as opposed to the UFC story with its fighters. And so, my opinion, my stance is, hey, yeah, Francis can have his awesome knockouts. Like, there's no question. Like, there was nobody from the era of the UFC that I am talking about that would ever hold a Kindle to him. I mean, I would even argue that anyone currently would hold a Kindle to him. However, I think that we quickly dismiss just because they were not as skilled does not mean that the star power wasn't there. And I think, like I mentioned, Chael and Anderson. I mean, Chael did a lot of things that Conor did. Chael set a lot of precedent. Izzy does a lot of things that Anderson did, whether it was the style. I mean, there was a lot of great fighters back in the day that, did not emerge, that did not end up on the scene of the UFC, whether it's because they weren't promoting themselves. And I think that Conor set the standard above, way, way, way and above everybody else in terms of self-promotion and really, influenced like those Colby Covingtons, those other people that, were actually truly like kind of carbon copies of what Conor did. However, the stars that we see from those eras, I mean, specifically Conor's era, he's kind of an anomaly. I don't think anybody can get anywhere close to him. But the old guys, I mean, they were doing it with nothing, and they still made a name for themselves. They didn't have the extra support of something else. And that's why these new stars need all the help they can get. The Sean O'Malley, who can't sell a card by himself, has to go and then ask Dustin Poirier to go be in a 5-round co-main event, sorry. But Tito and Chuck could sell this card by themselves. Like, what? Come on. Like, you can't tell me that those guys that stood out. And I know what you're going to say. I know that you're going to say that some of these other guys like GSP were not as exciting, this, that, whatever. But
they were fighting. They probably also were fighting in venues that were not even close to the same size as these guys are now because the brand was smaller too, right?
But so that's the brand. Yeah, that's
but like you. So but you highlighted that. But Sean's being tasked with selling out a 19,000 attendance arena versus what they were selling out. They were fighting in like a tennis arena, like a little tennis arena. So they wouldn't fight at the same size places, bro. Like they're fighting at the YMCA. That's what they were fighting at. You know what I'm saying? Like little trade shows. Like they were not fighting at the level of these guys. It's just not true. Like, all right, it's just not true, man. It's not true. I would. If we were talking boxing, I could get behind what you're trying to say, right? Because I think the Trailblazers play a pivotal role in leading to like the stardom of the guys we have now, right? We don't get a John Jones without the Chucks and those guys, what they did or Andersons, because they obviously inspired these young guys to get to this level. The difference between boxing and MMA is MMA has evolved as a sport where I can see that these guys are clearly more talented, which also encourages them to become bigger stars because the skill level they're competing against. In boxing, nothing's really changed in boxing. I still think the best boxers are from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. To this, I still think they beat the guys now. Chuck Liddell ain't beat nobody in the top 15, top 20 in the UFC right now, right? Besides a select few people you can name, because I'll give you your GSP and your Anderson. That's the only two you probably can name to me that actually could compete if they were actually in their prime in this time. Everyone else would get smoked. So, were they stars at their time? For sure. You know what I'm saying? But I mentioned this to you earlier. It's like saying Bob Cousy's a star. Bob Cousy would never play. Bob Cousy would be a broker, bro. He would not play basketball. He would be a used car salesman. But he's not seeing the court. Jerry West probably does not see the NBA court if he had to play with these point guards to now in the NBA. The times matter. And I respect those guys, and I'm a huge fan, right? So I was there for all those guys. But are they bigger stars than Israel Adesanya?
I mean,
No.
we're talking skill though versus stardom. I mean, come on. Yeah, Sean has the task of selling out a 19,000
That's a
seat
big
arena.
deal.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. But guess what? He also has the $1 billion brand of the UFC behind him. The UFC was nothing back in the day, and they were selling out arenas. I mean, come on. Like, if that's anything to carry weight there, I mean, it's
It's
like, okay,
violence.
yeah. I mean, it was violence, and it was
It sells.
frowned upon. Yeah, exactly. It does sell, but also it takes a guy like Anderson to just completely walk through the middleweight division and make a statement, come into the UFC out of nowhere and just take fire. I mean,
And beat up on cans. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
all
Beat up
right.
on punching bags. Beat up on cans. I love Anderson. But like I'm gonna stay the same regardless. Who I love Anderson. Like, was my favorite fighter, right? He fighting cans though. He's fighting cans. Like, so yes, it takes a guy who's actually talented to come fight cans to excite us to another level because we loved watching Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin beat up on each other like two guys in a hockey match for sure. Like, yeah, that's great. We love violence, but they weren't skilled. They weren't skilled, right? So it's yes, we needed guys like an Anderson to pop up, a GSP to pop up. Some of these guys, one of my favorites is BJ Penn. Some of these guys to pop up that were very uniquely skilled that can propel the brand. But now that the brand is propelled, you got these guys that are just bona fide superstars. Like they have all the skills. They also have social media to help them cheat, become bigger superstars, right? I'm not going to say they don't, but I could play that card across the board. I can say that for NBA players, like they have the NBA brand and the sponsorships and the social media to help them grow bigger. But if that's like yes, that's the difference. That's the difference. The difference in sorry, that's like the thing that's different between the two. But like the skill's also different. So I think the skill has to come into play there, right? Like like I said, I'm not going to go pull up old black and white photos to watch NBA games. Just like I'm not going to pull up old Chuck Liddell fights to watch over current fight reruns. We talked about it earlier before we recorded. We love Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. I've seen that fight at least 25 times. I'm not going back and watching Stephen Bonner versus Forrest Griffin over that. I'm not. I'm not. You know, it's just not going to happen, bro.
Listen, I gotta jump in here. I feel like I haven't gotten enough to say here. I here's what I'll say. I think you're pointing out the skill. They're pointing out the skill difference versus the stardom difference. I mean, yes, there is no question that they have access to more things. But I would say that if the guys back then had the access to that, who's to say they wouldn't be even bigger stars than what they were? And I want to go down a little bit of a different path here. I want to go down a little bit of a different path. Everybody in the UFC has like their nickname. Okay, like, and they're horrible these days. Like, I'm sorry, just absolutely horrible. But back in the day, the Iceman, like, and the fact that he had the shorts to rock it, and like he was a full brand in and of himself. Connor, yes, he's the Irish guy with the Billy strut. Okay, Anderson had the iconic yellow shorts, and now they can't even remotely brand themselves to make themselves unique stars. But Anderson literally paid homage to the Bruce Lee with the yellow. And here's the thing: Mirko Krokop, left leg hospital, right leg cemetery. I mean, who says that kind of stuff nowadays? Like, we're talking about like legends, people who made the moments where they didn't even have like a platform to share those things, except for these piddly little UFC reporters, MMA reporters, and they still made it big. They still made it iconic. They still made it like the fact that Brock Lesnar can get on a mic and diss Coors Light because he's a bigger fan of diss Bud Light because he's a bigger fan of Coors Light, and that becomes an iconic statement of his entire brand. I mean, yes, the UFC allowed for that, and the UFC brand allowed it for that, but like, these guys were doing it not because of the fact that they had somebody before them, but because they were like, this is pure desperation. We got to make a paycheck. We got to do something. We got to make a statement for ourselves. I mean, the fact that Chael still to this day argues that he was undefeated and undisputed. I mean, who else does that besides what? Connor, because he doesn't believe anything but knockouts are the true finish. So these guys, in my opinion, their stardom has reached levels of quote unquote Hall of Fame. And everybody else is just a cheap replica because they're trying to do something that everybody else has done. And I think if you give them the same tools, the same power, the same sort of distribution that they would have in today's technology, I think the UFC is exploding even more because there's actual personalities here. There's actual people who actually care about promoting themselves. but the UFC have shifted that stardom away and wanted to bring more promotion to the brand. And yeah, Sugar Show is a different anomaly. The guy literally has pink shorts 2 weekends ago. Respect and credit where credit's due.
Bryce Mitchell.
Yeah, but those are the two differences. I don't remember Izzy's. Did he have like the green short? Or was he the one that brought in the green shorts? I don't remember. That's one thing that yeah. Okay, that's three. That's three out of the hundreds of fighters. I mean, we had a man who literally broke the rules and wore underwear practically.
Who wears red? Who wears red?
I mean, everybody wears red. Don't just say Dustin Poirier. Don't go after.
No, like the red like compression shorts.
Yeah,
I feel like someone brought those like in too. Like, did someone bring those in? Anyway,
we're talking about colors. We're not talking about iconic like stardom. Like, we're not associated. Like you think
you're also talking about Iceman had those shorts, but he also kept sponsors on the back of his shorts. It was a different time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that the UFC is tamped down on the stars to not let them shine, and they just want the brand to flourish, and they don't want these Andersons, other people that have their own individuality that could shoot them past even what was normal. So,
like, listen, there's no way if we were in a convention hall and Chuck Liddell walked in and John Jones walks in, who do you think people are going to recognize more?
I'm Chuck Liddell, baby.
Because he's a 6-year-old white man with a mohawk. That's why. There's no other reason. There's no other reason why they're going to do this. It's because why does this old white man got a mohawk and wearing shirts that are too tight? Why people? Yeah, they're going to look at him weird. John Jones is going to look like any other athletic-looking man. No one's going to even think about it, right? But if Conor McGregor walks through there and how he dresses and struts, everyone's going to look at him and probably they're going to know who he is. He's the biggest star ever. I'm going to liken this to in regards to Michael Jordan, right? So click me up if you want to. Michael Jordan would not be as big of a star as he got to become if he had to play in today's basketball, because there's too many good players. Like, he still would have been great, but like he was the only person that athletic and that skilled at that time. So of course it shot him off like a rocket. Of course it did. But if he had to compete against these people, he would just be another person in the mesh of it all, right? So he benefited from that. So when you name a Chuck Liddell or people like that, they were the best they had. So of course somebody had to become a star in the brand, right? I don't think if you drop them in today's world, they get to that stardom because of my point, which is they're not skilled enough. If they had to compete against these guys, they're getting smoked. They're early prelim guys. Like, they're not good, bro. Like, none of them guys are good. Besides Anderson and GSP, and like, who else you want to name? Like, that actually have a chance? BJ Penn, young BJ, that's my guy. BJ got a chance. But like, if you go back to like the people you naming, like Brock Lesnar's trash, bro. Like, stop, he's trash. He would get smoked by everybody in the top 15, bro. Like, he's not good. Brock Lesnar got exposed. Like, he is not good, man. And he was on the juice the whole time. Like, he's not good, bro. So like, who can you name? Like, give me 10 people, and don't say Chael Sonnen. Because Chael Sonnen was a career loser. Don't name Chael Sonnen to me. Yes, he has great mic skills, but in regards to being a fighter, he's not good at it. Like, he's not good. So like, give me 10 legitimate superstars. Matter of fact, give me 5. I want 10 is too high. Give me 5 legitimate superstars that you name from that era.
Uriah Faber, Jose Aldo. Uriah Faber, Jose Aldo. Yes.
Uriah Faber was. Are you saying we're talking about the UFC?
We're talking about the UFC. I'm not talking about WEC.
Uriah Faber was not a superstar in the UFC, Ian.
Yes, he was. He was the California kid. I got the camera. Jose Aldo. Regardless, he carried into the new generation. Yes, he was a superstar. Don't you put it. Better stay in your lane.
Or great. So superstar, and so instance, I'm doing a lot of basketball references here. LeBron James, superstar. But there's also some very good players in the NBA that can score, right? Like, I would say like Anthony Edwards, a great scorer, great player, maybe a young star. Luka Doncic, superstar, right? But like, when you throw out a name like Jose Aldo, great champion. Was he a superstar, like a global superstar, bro? I don't know if he's a global superstar. Like,
I mean, he definitely was an international superstar. I mean, come on now. I mean, the only one.
Cool. All right, that's one. Give me 5. You said 5, right?
Uriah Faber is up there. Faber. Yes, I will say that. Yes, I will die on that hill. Yes, Cowboy Cerrone, another superstar. Yes, Another superstar. Yes.
Well, superstar.
Yes. He was an iconic figure.
So Cowboy's a part of your generation?
Yes, he was the old man. He's the old man now. He was not the old man then. Don't disrespect Cowboy like that. And let me have
Cowboy's
this.
Superstar.
You literally have all of the
Can I
big.
Stop you real quick?
Yeah.
Let me stop you real quick. You just said to lead off your 5 superstars. You gave me Uriah Faber and Cowboy Cerrone.
Yes.
Where's Chuck Liddell at? Where's Chuck Liddell at?
We've already talked about Chuck. I don't need to add him to that list. We already know. I'm added 5 others. I'll add Forrest Griffin there. I'll add Chuck Liddell there. I'll add Tito Ortiz there. Vanderlei. I mean, come on. Come on.
That's funny. This is great. This is great. I love it. This is going to be good for YouTube. People in the comments, please kill me for this thing. But he said Uriah Faber was a superstar. Uriah Faber was a loser. He's a loser.
Yes, he never had a belt. Congratulations. But guess who never had a belt too? Nate Diaz.
Superstar. You can't even deny it. He sells out cards.
Yeah.
When has Uriah Faber sold out cards?
I don't know. I don't have the metrics on that.
Maybe people in the comments, maybe you should just look up, I don't know, all the people he's naming. Just go look up and see when they headline cards and they sold out. Because I'm sure they did not. Like Forrest Griffin selling out cards? Stop it, man.
He single-handedly saved the UFC, and I will die on this hill.
Okay, I don't know. No, I'm not here to argue that. I think that's true. We need pioneers. We need people to make impactful things like that to lead to great things like we have now. I'm not discrediting that at all. What I'm trying to say to you though is they have never been superstars to the level of these guys. It's not even close, man. Like those guys, a lot of those guys probably got jobs now. Like we're being honest, like legit have jobs. They have to work because they're trash. They're fighters.
You literally like this. These last 2 minutes, you literally said, "There, little child," and just patted me on the head. That's taking some disrespect away from them.
Who wants to ever hear from Chuck Liddell do commentating a cage side? What's he going to talk about? What's he know about MMA? What I know? Like he threw wild haymakers. Like when you think about those people, yes, you could definitely sit down a couple of those guys because they had skills. But when you start thinking about those guys, you realize they're more closer to my generation of people I'm defending than yours. So of course they had skills. They're not part of that old guard.
There's going to be overlap for sure, but don't discredit my points with the points that I made because I
say Uriah Faber is a superstar.
Yes, I will die.
I don't even know who I'm talking to anymore. That guy is.
Thoughts and prayers.
The Crimson Chin.
All right. We could argue this for hours, and I feel like we got to put a bow on it sometimes. I'm going to die on the old guard and the respect that they deserve. And obviously Tyrelle is going to continue to pat me on the back like he's done literally this entire last 5 minutes. So the real results will show in the comments. People, if you're still listening, still watching, still joining us, let us know what you think in the comments. Give us a like, subscribe if you want more content like this, and let Tyrelle know that these boys that were representing the sport way back then, that they actually would be stars now or are bigger than what he's giving them credit for. Yeah, I said it. I'm calling you out one last time. So
Uriah Faber.
Yeah, okay. So
Cowboy
if you
Cerrone.
you stop.
Oh my God.
Well, if you've enjoyed today's comment and making me the laughing stock, apparently, of Tyrelle's ire, please subscribe. Please like the video. As we're trying to grow this YouTube channel, obviously, we want to continue to put out content like this. Let us know what you think about this. Let us know how you feel. If you want to follow us on Instagram, go to Instagram. It'll be fighting_words_pod. If you want to listen to the audio version of this podcast or want to see the video version on Spotify, you can follow us at Fighting Words. Or if you want to listen to it on Apple Podcasts or pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. So anyways, Tyrelle, it's been fun debating this, and I appreciate you hopping on. Obviously, there's always next week that we'll probably talk about something wild and crazy on the podcast. But viewers, thanks for listening and tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week.